Stop. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Subscribe now. We have new stories every day. Now, let's go. Steam from my morning coffee wafted across the kitchen as I prepared for another day in Crescent Springs, a quiet suburban enclave far from urban chaos. I turned 55 a few months ago, and lines around my eyes hinted at decades of conflict and resolution. My name is Gregor Hale, a security consultant with a specialty in covert surveillance. Professional experience shaped me into a methodical observer, a man who hunts for secrets and reveals them at pivotal moments. Stacks of old case files rested on my mahogany desk in the study, each folder brimming with notes on corporate espionage or data breaches. I once provided advice for top technology firms, devising protocols to protect valuable information from prying hands. My career demanded precision and calm, traits I carried into my personal life. My wife, Ramona, often teased me about my stoic demeanor. She possessed a wild spark, an electric presence. We married 15 years earlier, drawn together by opposite personalities which seemed to mesh. Our two-story home displayed remnants of our shared history. Wedding photos adorned the living room, capturing a shining afternoon under an arch of orchids. Vacation snapshots dotted the hallway. Florida beaches, a cabin in the mountains, a lakeside picnic with bright skies overhead. Ramona once craved adventure, and I supported her flamboyant style. She thrived on novelty, from exotic cuisines to spontaneous weekend trips. In recent months, a gap crept into our daily routine. She spent longer hours at her marketing office or returned home reeking of unfamiliar cologne. Her phone chimed late into the night, followed by hushed murmurs behind a closed door. I suspect other spouses might have confronted her immediately, demanded explanations, or erupted in anger. My instincts guided me toward a different path. As a security consultant, I prefer gathering proof before launching a strike. One evening, I wandered upstairs to fetch a charger from the bedroom. The door stood slightly ajar. Ramona, perched on the edge of the bed, whispered into her phone. A male voice, pitched low, rumbled from the speaker. I caught fragments, a reference to midnight rendezvous in an empty parking spot near her office. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to remain quiet. She eventually finished her cryptic chat and left the room. I exhaled, my mind spinning with possibilities. I sat on the sofa later, lights dimmed, replaying the incident in my head. I recognized the signals of betrayal. Secret phone calls, glossy eyes when she stepped inside after unexplained errands, half-hearted excuses about urgent deadlines. Once suspicion took root, I spotted more indications. Lipstick smudges on coffee mugs at odd hours, receipts for questionable purchases, a brand of cologne swirling around her jackets. My chest burned with simmering outrage, but I maintained a neutral facade, determined to discover the extent of her deception. I selected a secure phone tapping device from my locked cabinet, one normally reserved for high-profile clients facing sabotage. Ramona owned a sleek smartphone, which I intended to monitor. Early one morning, she hopped into the shower, humming a tune. I seized her phone from the nightstand and placed a slim chip between the battery and circuit board. A practiced flick of my wrist, a steady hand, and the process concluded within 90 seconds. This chip would feed me audio logs once I synced it with my laptop. Ramona emerged from the steamy bathroom, a robe draped across her shoulders, hair slick against her neck. She offered a passing grin, unaware of my covert operation. I poured her a cup of tea, inquiring about her day. She responded in vague terms about meetings and tight schedules, then disappeared out the door. I made no move to stop her. My plan involved observation, not confrontation. Each evening, I retreated to my study, a chamber lined with thick drapes and antique lamps. I inserted a flash drive into my laptop, launching software designed to decode the chip's transmissions. Fragmented voices crackled through the speakers, each snippet of conversation tagged with a timestamp. Some dialogues sounded routine, Ramona discussing product launches or client proposals. Other segments dripped with intimacy, mentions of secret dinners, sensual whispers, and fleeting references to rooms near a motel off Interstate 9. Those recordings demolished any lingering optimism I once harbored about her loyalty. She breathlessly addressed an individual named Roland. A coworker, perhaps, or a manager from a partnering firm. He purred compliments in response, praising her boldness and inviting her to slip away from me at night. My nails dug into the wooden armrest of my chair. I stared at the digital waveform on screen, replaying each incriminating second. Memories whirled through my mind. Ramona leaning her head on my shoulder during fireworks at the county fair. Ramona clutching my hand while we roamed the farmer's market. Scenes of quiet intimacy, illusions of trust. Now those images clashed with her sultry, hushed confessions to another man. Rage brewed within me. I shut my laptop, pacing across the study. My reflection in a mirrored cabinet revealed a stern glare, jaw muscles clenched. I refused to hurl accusations prematurely. My professional past championed patience. Strategy outranked haste. I compiled the worst clips, labeling them as Exhibit A, B, C, so on. I typed out transcripts, verifying their authenticity. I dreaded each lurid detail, but I pressed forward. Evidence served as the foundation for a plan which would rock Ramona's world. She deserved no gentle approach. She unleashed havoc upon my dignity, so I would return the favor. A family reunion loomed on the horizon, scheduled for the upcoming month at her cousin's impressive estate. Ramona mentioned the date at breakfast a few times, hinting at a grand event with distant relatives, including influential individuals from her marketing circles. My mind crafted a scenario in which I could reveal her wrongdoing in a dramatic flourish. She savored public validation, always boasting about her stable marriage and dynamic career. Exposing her affair in front of her adoring family would serve as a fitting blow. I spent quiet moments refining my approach. I pictured a projector screen in the middle of the estate's grand hall, revealing audio or text transcripts. I imagined the hush which would sweep across the crowd once they realized Ramona's perfect image stood on shaky ground. She would watch her illusions collapse under the weight of undeniable proof. The thought stirred both satisfaction and sorrow inside me. Our relationship once shimmered with hope, but she cast it aside. At night, she slept soundly beside me, her breaths steady. My eyes remained open. I listened to her breathing, replaying her recorded moans to Roland. Each recollection ignited my resolve. I recognized a primal fury clawing at my chest. Betrayal, the ugliest wedge between spouses, had carved a path through our home. I could almost sense the walls absorbing her secrets. One evening, she proposed a movie outing. She wore a fitted blouse, hair pinned in a stylish updo. Her gaze flickered with expectation, possibly guilt as well. I forced a polite grin and agreed to the plan. We shared popcorn in a theater, watched an action film, engaged in small talk. My mind, however, roiled with everything I discovered in those audio logs. Her laughter sounded hollow to me. I pictured Roland's face, a silhouette looming in her fantasies. Late on the same night, I crept into my study, sifting through new recordings. She had arranged another rendezvous for the following week, apparently at an upscale lounge near her office building. I typed each detail into a digital file, building an ironclad timeline. Perhaps I would intercept them soon, gather photographic proof. My entire being ached to catch them in person, though I reminded myself an uncontrolled outburst might compromise my larger objective. Morning arrived, sunlight pushing through parted curtains in our bedroom. Ramona stirred, brushing her fingers across my arm. She seemed oblivious to the silent storm raging under my exterior. I rose from the bed, calm and detached. I devoted a final glance to her features, still reminiscent of the woman I once cherished. Something shriveled within me, replaced by a fierce desire for retribution. My plan advanced, each step carefully mapped. I would unmask her in front of those who prize her reputation. The man who claimed her affections would watch from the sidelines as well, powerless once my evidence emerged. I intended to dismantle their illusions, ensuring they confronted ruin. After many years of forging secure systems for powerful clients, I now harnessed my expertise for a far more personal cause. Ramona's betrayal would not remain hidden. In the following week, I refined my efforts and prepared to catch Ramona in a more concrete scenario. Her conversations with Roland hinted at an evening encounter in a downtown parking structure. She instructed him to park on the third level near a forgotten corner, away from security cameras. My gut churned each time I replayed her excitement. She craved his presence, his embrace. I suspected they engaged in physical contact before, but this time I vowed to document undeniable proof. I arrived at a grim concrete building 2 hours before the proposed rendezvous. I wore a simple baseball cap and a gray windbreaker, blending into the urban landscape. A few sit-ins and SUVs dotted the levels. I selected a vantage point on the 4th tier, behind a cement column overlooking the ramp leading to level 3. My phone rested in my hand, camera app ready. Ramona's text logs revealed an approximate arrival time, 9:30 in the evening. I waited, heart pounding. The city's neon glow flickered against my vehicle's windows. I scrolled through my recordings to occupy my restless thoughts, replaying each salacious whisper. My jaw tightened. A surge of bitter adrenaline washed over me. Headlights illuminated the ramp at 9:22. A compact SUV rolled into view. I recognized Ramona's silhouette behind the steering wheel. She pulled into a dim spot near a steel railing, engine idling. Moments later, a taller figure emerged from an approaching sit-in. He stepped briskly, scanning the surroundings for curious eyes, unaware of my presence above. Ramona switched off her headlights. She opened her door. They met halfway, arms encircling each other. My stomach twisted into knots as I zoomed my phone's lens. I snapped a series of photos, capturing their silhouettes merging in a tight embrace. He pressed his lips to her neck, hands settling around her waist. She angled her body against him, as if starved for his touch. I clenched my teeth, forcing composure. I swiped to video mode, recording from my hidden perch. They retreated toward her SUV, huddled by the passenger side. Dim overhead lights revealed enough detail to confirm their identities. Ramona's blouse slipped off her shoulder, revealing a portion of lace strap. Roland cupped her cheek. Their mouths fused in a passionate kiss. I angled the phone carefully, zooming in on their clandestine encounter. Disgust roiled inside me, but I refused to tear my gaze away. Evidence. I needed ironclad evidence. After a tense minute, Ramona gestured for him to slide into the passenger seat. The door closed behind him, muffling further action. My vantage point didn't allow a glimpse inside the vehicle, but I recorded them from the side window as shapes entwined. Her head tipped reclined, a silent moan shaping her lips. My pulse slammed against my ribs. My grip on the phone faltered for an instant. A swirl of fury and heartbreak threatened to drive me down there, fists raised. Instead, I forced patience, filming until they disappeared from sight. The footage annihilated any remaining illusions. She shared her body with another man, brazenly, with no remorse. I ended the recording and sank against the cold cement column. My breath hissed between my teeth. The situation seemed surreal, as if I had stepped into a nightmare. I inhaled, forcing composure. She would pay for this. They both would. I hurried down the stairwell, avoiding the elevator to remain inconspicuous. My footsteps echoed in the deserted corridors until I reached the street. City lights glowed above me, mocking my turmoil. A harsh wind sliced across my face. I gripped my jacket, scanning the sidewalk for potential watchers. My battered pride and roiling anger combined into a potent brew. I visualized the future unveiling, the moment when Ramona and Roland faced a crowd of horrified onlookers. My lips twitched in grim satisfaction. Once home, I locked myself in my study. My laptop screen glowed with malicious promise as I transferred the new footage. The audio logs carried weight, but these visuals displayed raw infidelity. I watched the clip again, flinching as Roland's mouth crashed against Ramona's. She leaned into his touch, arms wound around his neck. My hands trembled. I paused the playback. A single frame was enough to stoke an inferno within me. Shortly after midnight, Ramona returned. Her heels tapped along the hallway. She paused at the study door, probably sensing the hush in the air. "You awake?" she called softly. I responded with a curt yes. She peered in, her expression guarded. A slight flush colored her cheeks, perhaps from physical exertion. "Late meeting," she murmured. I nodded, biting my tongue to suppress an acidic remark. My heart pounded, but I schooled my features into neutrality. She drifted toward the bedroom, leaving behind a faint swirl of perfume that stung my senses. Once her footsteps receded, I exhaled. My entire body quaked, adrenaline still coursing. The impetus to confront her nearly overwhelmed me, but I recalled my plan. No impulsive explosions. I needed the perfect stage, the final act when she would be stripped of excuses. My mind summoned the upcoming family gathering. In 2 weeks, her relatives, plus numerous associates, would gather for a festive weekend. I planned to deliver a final blow there. When I eventually crawled into bed, Ramona pretended to slumber on her side, arms wrapped around a pillow. I slid under the blanket, rage humming in my veins. I stared at the ceiling, images of her tryst replaying behind my eyelids. My teeth ground together. She once belonged to me in every sense, vowing to share her life and devotion. Now she cavorted in parking lots, hungry for a stranger's caresses. She aimed to keep me in the dark, blinded by false hope. Work offered a distraction from the madness. The next day, I examined reports for a hospital's new security system, double-checking camera placements, contact sensors, and alarm triggers. My focus wavered. Each beep of my phone triggered an urge to check more evidence, relive the dreadful scene in the SUV. By late afternoon, I closed my files, exhausted from mental conflict. When Ramona texted me about skipping dinner due to overtime, I responded with a brief acknowledgement, lips curling in ironic amusement. Days blurred together in preparation for the big reveal. I purchased a portable projector and tested it in my study, overlaying the video on a blank wall. The footage glimmered with damning clarity. I copied the relevant files onto a secure flash drive, labeled with a single letter R. The device would remain hidden until the reunion. Meanwhile, I continued collecting logs from Ramona's phone, capturing every new mention of her illicit lover. On the surface, our household routine proceeded as usual. Ramona bustled around in the morning, rummaging for her car keys, occasionally tossing me a polite wave. She slid into her seat at the dining table, munching toast while scanning emails. I responded with minimal words, sipping coffee. Tension simmered between us, unspoken yet palpable. One evening, she approached me in the living room, perched on the arm of a chair. "Are you upset about something?" she asked, voice mild. I studied her composed posture, recalling her passionate embrace with Roland in the SUV. My pulse kicked up. I responded, "Long days at work, nothing more." She pressed her lips together, as if debating whether to push for more details. She shrugged and drifted away. My gaze lingered on her retreating form, revulsion and heartbreak colliding inside my chest. I waged a war against myself daily. An urge to confront her head-on battled with my determination to unleash a more devastating approach. Whenever I replayed the hidden camera footage, a renewed rush of fury erupted in me. She had tossed aside our marriage vows and found pleasure in another man's arms, defiling everything we once cherished. Her nonchalance fueled my resolve. The day of reckoning approached, and I intended to deliver a punishment so sharp she would never dismiss it. A few nights later, I stepped onto our porch for fresh air. A crescent moon hovered overhead. The hush of the neighborhood served as a stark contrast to the raging storm in my head. I contemplated the steps I had taken: infiltration of her phone, stakeout in a parking garage, capturing explicit images. My approach had been cold, calculated, ruthless. My remorse for invading her privacy evaporated once I witnessed her brazen betrayal. She forced my hand. I allowed my anger to settle. The family reunion loomed. I pictured Ramona parading among relatives, a bright smile plastered on her face, unaware of the bomb waiting to drop. Roland might text her during the event, hungry for a moment alone. Perhaps they would steal away for a secret kiss near the garden. The thought made my fingers curl into fists. I closed my eyes, inhaling the night air. Soon, I whispered inwardly. Very soon. Sunrise on the reunion weekend arrived sooner than expected. Ramona bubbled with excitement during breakfast, chatting about her extended family's grand get-together. She rattled off names of cousins and uncles who planned to attend. I nodded politely, concealing the tension coiled within my gut. She never suspected my hidden scheme. My intention: deliver a crushing blow in front of the very people who saw her as a charming success story. We drove toward her cousin's estate in separate vehicles because she claimed she needed to arrive early for planning. I followed an hour later, storing my evidence in a small locked case on the passenger seat. My chest thumped with anticipation as I envisioned the upcoming confrontation. Nothing would remain hidden once I projected those images onto a screen. The memory of her brazen encounter with Roland in the parking structure still churned inside my head. A cluster of cars lined the circular driveway. Manicured hedges and a lavish fountain anchored the front yard. I stepped from my sit-in, greeted by a swirl of guests in pastel clothing, carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres or balancing plates of finger foods. Laughter drifted through the open doors of the house. Waiters in crisp white shirts flitted about, offering champagne flutes. The entire scene exuded wealth and polish. I cut through the crowd, scanning for Ramona. I spotted her near a marble staircase, conversing animatedly with an older woman. She caught my eye and offered a brief smile, beckoning me closer. "Come meet Aunt Florine," Ramona said, tapping the older woman's shoulder. "This is my husband, Gregor." I nodded courteously, ignoring the subtle glimmer in Ramona's eyes. She performed the role of adoring spouse, arms resting around my shoulders for a fleeting moment. I suppressed a shudder, recalling her embrace with Roland. My entire body tensed, but I returned a polite greeting to Florine before excusing myself. I sensed Ramona's perplexed gaze following me as I headed toward the far corner of the foyer. Within an hour, guests congregated in a spacious hall for opening remarks and celebratory toasts. Chandeliers sparkled overhead. A small stage occupied one end of the hall, complete with a microphone and an easel for family photos. Ramona had planned to display a slideshow highlighting familial milestones. Perfect. I approached an event organizer, flashed a winning smile, and requested permission to connect my laptop for a special presentation. The coordinator shrugged, guiding me to the AV console. I saw Ramona weaving through the crowd, too distracted to notice my movements. I powered up my laptop behind a heavy velvet curtain at stage right. My pulse hammered. The evidence folder glowed on the desktop. I placed the flash drive containing the incriminating footage into a USB port. A hush fell upon the crowd as her cousin stepped to the microphone, welcoming relatives and praising Ramona for coordinating the event. She blushed with pride, stepping onto the stage to greet everyone. Applause rippled across the hall. She sparkled under those lights, posture poised, projecting an image of grace. My stomach lurched, furious at her brazen duplicity. Ramona glanced my way, possibly expecting applause or a supportive nod. I gave a small wave, hand nearly trembling with pent-up adrenaline. She introduced a slideshow of warm family memories. Baby photos, holiday gatherings, birthdays. Cheerful images transitioned across a large screen behind her, courtesy of a digital projector. Awed murmurs rose in the audience. I waited, counting seconds. Each nostalgic picture pierced me, reminding me of how thoroughly she betrayed the union that once defined our household. Finally, Ramona concluded her segment with a smile. "I'm grateful for everyone here," she said into the mic. "Now let's enjoy the evening. Food and drinks are out on the terrace, so please mingle." She turned to step down, but I emerged from behind the curtain, microphone in hand. The audience grew curious. Ramona pivoted, eyebrows raised. "Pardon the intrusion," I said, forcing a gracious tone. I prepared a brief addition to the slideshow. something of a personal nature. Ramona's expression shifted, confusion mingling with faint concern. I plugged my laptop into the projector cable, toggling the display. The big screen went dark. A hush settled across the hall. My palms dampened, but I pressed on. A single freeze frame materialized. Ramona's SUV in the parking garage. Silence rippled through the audience. My voice came out steady. Please direct your attention to the screen. I advanced the footage. Ramona appeared, stepping out of her vehicle to greet Roland. An uneasy shuffle passed among the onlookers. She gasped, color draining from her cheeks. Her father, seated in the front row, frowned in perplexity. The next frames revealed the full embrace. Ramona's arms looped around Roland's neck, lips fused in a heated kiss. A collective intake of breath spread across the hall. My chest fluttered with a savage thrill, overshadowed by heartbreak. Ramona sputtered, "Stop." The older relatives gawked at the screen, eyes wide. Several onlookers covered their mouths in disbelief. Another snippet played. The partial silhouette of Roland's face against Ramona's, her blouse sliding off her shoulder. Muted gasps punctuated the silence. Ramona dashed forward, frantic. She tried to shield the lens with her palms, but the footage continued. I captured the microphone again. "I discovered a hidden chapter in our marriage," I announced, voice echoing. "This is Ramona's paramour, Roland. They have carried on quite a secret affair." Whispers swelled in the hall. She whirled on me, cheeks blazing, a mixture of desperation and fury contorting her features. "You're insane," she hissed, grabbing my arm. "Turn it off immediately." I yanked free, ignoring her demand. The crowd murmured louder, confusion and shock swirling in the air. Her father stood, sputtering. "Ramona, explain this nonsense." She turned toward him, speechless. I advanced more slides. Text messages, screenshots of late-night calls, pinpointing the time she snuck away. Each piece struck like a hammer blow. She lunged for the laptop, but I was faster. I snapped it shut and grabbed the mic again. "I have plenty more," I said, voice throbbing with anger. Ramona spun lies for months, betraying vows. She shook, tears threatening to spill, but her expression hardened with indignation. Gasps continued around us. The shame she dreaded so deeply now swarmed her from every corner of the hall. An older aunt fainted, dropping onto a chair. Ramona's cousin rushed to help. Others advanced in agitation, glancing between Ramona and me. She tried to gather words, but her mouth quivered, producing only strangled sputters. The perfect facade crumbled. I paused, scanning the stunned faces in front of me. Blood pounded through my ears. Triumph mingled with heartbreak, fueling an unsteady storm inside me. Ramona's father stepped forward. "Gregor, lower your voice," he commanded. "We can handle this privately." But I refused to yield. My chest heaved. Privately? She paraded our marriage as flawless while sneaking around with someone else. We're beyond private now. A hush followed, thick with tension. Ramona dropped her gaze, tears sliding down her cheeks. She pivoted, searching for an exit path. Whispering relatives blocked her way, uncertain whether to console or condemn her. She half ran toward the side door, stiletto heels clacking on marble. I watched her vanish into the corridor. Afterward, I stepped off the stage, laptop clutched under one arm, ignoring the barrage of questions and pleas for calm. Rage still rumbled beneath my composure, yet a cold clarity lingered. Ramona's perfect veneer lay in ruins. I strode out of the hall, ignoring wide-eyed relatives who reached for my elbow. Through the open foyer doors, I spotted Ramona sobbing near a gilded mirror in an adjacent room, face in her hands. Her father hovered behind her, uncertain how to proceed. I sidestepped them, scanning the hallway for the exit. Servants parted like startled birds as I swept past. Out on the lawn, night air brushed against my damp forehead. I gulped it in, heart pounding. The big reveal transpired precisely as I envisioned, but the emotional cost weighed on me. My marriage, or what remained of it, lay shattered. A hollow pang pulsed through my ribcage. I shook my head in grim acceptance. Her betrayal demanded a harsh response, and I delivered it. A few scattered stars twinkled above as I reached my sit-in. Muffled commotion filtered from inside the house. Family members probably scrambled to salvage the evening or comfort Ramona. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as I slid into the driver's seat. One stage of my plan concluded. Another remained. Retribution aimed at Roland. He would not emerge unscathed. I roared out of the driveway, gravel scattering under my tires. The air inside my sit-in felt stifling, saturated with residual fury. My mind churned, fixated on Roland, a man who toyed with my marriage, a trespasser who treated Ramona like a casual fling. My hands shook on the wheel, but I forced them steady. I refused to let him escape consequences. She had faced her public humiliation. Now he deserved his share. I parked at a nearby gas station and pulled up the covert phone logs on my laptop. Ramona and Roland often shared their schedules, confirming times for trysts. One upcoming evening meeting glowed on the screen, a plan to meet at a fancy rooftop lounge 2 nights from now. I clenched my fists, recalling the footage of their heated parking garage encounter. The memory fed a smoldering hatred. Ramona had texted him earlier, describing the family reunion. She mentioned her anxiety about potential drama, but neglected to mention she got exposed on stage. Roland responded with casual reassurance. "You'll be fine, babe. I'm sure he won't suspect anything." I exhaled, teeth grinding. They believed me a clueless bystander. That delusion vanished tonight. I clicked out of the logs, lips curling in grim resolve. Roland's world would implode soon enough. Early the next morning, I surveyed our home. Ramona hadn't returned. She possibly spent the night at her cousin's estate, reeling from the aftermath. The emptiness almost felt serene, though shards of heartbreak lingered. I gathered a few personal items. Clothes, documents, my collection of security gadgets. In my mind, I severed ties with Ramona's presence. I intended to serve divorce papers swiftly. First, Roland demanded attention. I turned to an old friend in law enforcement, Boris, a homicide detective in the city. We met for coffee at a diner, a discreet spot off the main highway. He had a square jaw and deep-set eyes that always seemed to probe for hidden truths. He greeted me with a firm handshake. "Gregor, you look a bit tense," Boris remarked. I exhaled, nodding. Over steaming mugs, I relayed the bare bones. My wife cheated with a man named Roland, an unscrupulous coworker. I wanted legal clarity on how far I could push retribution without crossing lines, which would land me in trouble. Boris's gaze sharpened. "Revenge is messy," he warned quietly. "You can reveal him to his employer, if workplace policies forbid fraternizing. You can publicly shame him, but crossing the line into violence or threats could bite you." I met his stare, jaw set. "I intend to dismantle his life, Boris, not commit murder. My wife already saw her image ruined. Now I aim to strip him of status." Boris sipped his coffee, glancing around to ensure no eavesdroppers lingered. "Gather evidence proving wrongdoing on his part, especially if it violates a code of conduct. Afterward, I can pass it along quietly. We can open an investigation if there's any criminal angle." I nodded. He may have misused corporate resources or engaged in shady deals. My data might reveal more. Let me dig deeper. We parted on that note, a half-formed plan swirling in my thoughts. Back in my makeshift command center at a modest motel, I cracked into Roland's digital footprint. Using phone logs and text metadata from Ramona's device, I traced his online profiles, cross-referenced various email addresses, and discovered a trail of suspicious wire transfers. He apparently diverted funds from a company account into private holdings, perhaps as hush money for other indiscretions. My mouth curled in satisfaction. I compiled screenshots, bank statements, IP logs. Each file glimmered with the promise of ruin. I placed them on a flash drive labeled with a single letter R2, a companion to the earlier R drive. Afternoon sunlight slanted through the motel curtains as I studied the final result. Enough evidence to bury Roland in financial scandal. I needed a culminating scene. My stare drifted to the phone message about the rooftop lounge. Perfect setting for a final confrontation. The public backdrop would mirror Ramona's embarrassment, except this time the focus would be on him. I relished the image of him squirming in front of well-dressed patrons. On the designated evening, I arrived at the lounge early. Glittering city lights sparkled in the distance. Polished steel furniture and an open-air bar dominated the space. Low couches created cozy corners for couples to whisper sweet nothings. I guessed Roland intended a seductive rendezvous with Ramona. Little did he realize she had bigger problems to handle. She never reached out to me, so I assumed she hid, humiliated. That left Roland an easy target. I stationed myself near a potted palm, scanning arrivals. A live jazz trio played softly, their smooth tunes mingling with clinking glassware. Soon Roland strolled in, wearing a dark blazer and exuding casual confidence. He scanned the area, presumably searching for Ramona. My pulse accelerated. I let him order a cocktail at the bar. The overhead lights cast shifting shadows across the lounge. Once I saw an opening, I approached, stepping onto a patch of tile behind him. He spun, eyebrows knitting in confusion. "You," he muttered. "Where's Ramona?" I raised an eyebrow. Uncertain, possibly sodding on her cousin's floor, or halfway to a new existence. Doesn't matter. Roland set his drink aside, tension radiating from his posture. "Is there a reason you're here?" he demanded, voice low. I smiled, a cold, humorless gesture. "Yes, you destroyed my marriage. Now I plan to return the favor, though in your case, it's your career and your reputation." Roland tried to laugh, but the sound died midway. "You have no proof." I pulled out my phone. "Really?" I tapped a folder, revealing scanned bank documents. "Misappropriated funds from your corporate account. Secret payoffs. Perhaps your superiors would appreciate a heads up." His face paled. He reached for my phone, but I snapped it away, eyes blazing. "Not so fast. You waltzed into my life, snatched my wife's affection, as if I wouldn't notice. That was your first mistake." He glared, flicking a gaze around to see if anyone watched. A few bystanders sipped cocktails, oblivious to our tension. "You planned to blackmail me," he hissed. I shrugged, stepping closer so our voices wouldn't carry. "Something like it. I have enough to bury you in legal battles. Meanwhile, your name will be splashed across your corporate intranet." I paused, letting him sweat. "I want you to vanish from Ramona's orbit. Resign from your job. Reveal your affair to your boss, or I will. Afterward, walk away before I tighten the screws further." He swallowed hard, jaw-ticking. "You think you can break me?" I lowered my voice to a deadly whisper. "I can, and I will." My stare bored into him, unwavering. Seconds passed in a silent duel of wills. Finally, Roland's shoulders drooped. Fear twisted his features. He spat. "She was restless. Bored with you. Not my fault." Rage flickered in me, but I shoved it aside. I refused to let him spark a brawl. "She made her choice, but so did you. Face your punishment." Roland stormed out without another word, nearly colliding with a server carrying a tray of drinks. I trailed behind, determined to press him further if he attempted to slip away. He stomped down a spiral staircase leading to the street. I cornered him near a walkway, blocking his path. "Don't forget the instructions," I warned, extracting a small envelope. "Inside, you'll find a summary of everything I hold against you. Follow it, or your world collapses." He snatched the envelope with trembling fingers. "You're a monster," he growled. I leveled a glare. "I protect what belongs to me. You meddled. Now you face consequences." He stiffened, then swiveled away, vanishing into the crowd. My chest rose and fell, a savage triumph coiling inside me. I marched toward my parked sit-in, ignoring curious stares from passers-by. Roland's downfall had begun. I slid behind the wheel, adrenaline pulsing. A trace of satisfaction mingled with profound sorrow. Ramona's betrayal left a crater in my soul, but I had proven I was no passive victim. My phone vibrated with an incoming message. I glanced at the screen. Boris's number. A concise text. Documents received. Investigations underway. Perfect. Roland would find no refuge. The final stage awaited, legally severing ties with Ramona, and emerging from this wreckage as a man who refused to be broken. I waited 3 restless days before contacting Ramona again. Our marriage required a formal conclusion, and I had no desire for reconciliation. The legal route seemed inevitable. Paperwork for divorce sat on my desk, already filled out. Every cell in my body urged me to finalize it and cast her aside. News of Roland's downfall arrived in discrete fragments. Boris confirmed Roland's employer uncovered his secret accounts and fired him on the spot. A lawsuit loomed. Whispers circulated around town of a man who lost his position, home, and reputation in one brutal swoop. I sensed no pity. He earned every misfortune through his betrayal and arrogance. Ramona reached out at last, summoning me to our home for a conversation. I approached the familiar front door with guarded steps, ignoring the pang of memories. Inside, the silence felt ominous. Furniture stood where we had left it. Wedding photos still decorated the walls, mocking the hollowed union which had crumbled. Ramona stood near the fireplace, hands clasped. Her mascara was smudged, evidence of previous tears. She spoke first, voice cracked. I realize words mean little now, but I want to apologize. She shifted on her heels, gaze darting away. I betrayed you, and I was wrong. I lingered by the doorway, arms folded, unwilling to step closer. My insides trembled, raw from lingering heartbreak, but I kept my tone cold. You humiliated me, shattered what we built. She nodded, swallowing hard. I accept your anger. I accept you despise me. Her voice dropped. Roland is gone. He took advantage of me, convinced me I needed excitement. I see how foolish I was. A surge of bitterness swelled in my throat. You made a choice, Ramona. Don't blame him for everything. Her eyes glistened, and she clasped her fingers together more tightly. I can't repair the damage, but I hoped we might find a solution which doesn't end in utter destruction. She gestured vaguely toward the living room. Perhaps counseling. An incredulous laugh escaped me. Counseling. After I watched you in the garage, after I exposed your behavior in front of your own family. This is beyond therapy sessions. My voice echoed through the empty space. She flinched, tears sliding down her cheeks. For an instant, a flicker of pity stirred in me, but I crushed it. She made her bed with him. Pulling the divorce papers from my leather folio, I set them on a side table. Sign. I won't drag this out. We have no children. We can settle property division without a protracted fight. You get the house if you want it. I plan to start over somewhere else. Her trembling fingers hovered above the documents. She scanned the lines, shoulders sagging as reality sank in. We had 15 years, she whispered, voice quavering. I never wanted it to end this way. I got lost. My lips curved in a mirthless smile. You lost me the moment you gave yourself to another man. She pressed her palm over her mouth, stifling a sob. She signed each page in silence. Outside, rain pattered against the windows, a soft dirge marking the demise of our marriage. I stood immobile, arms crossed, scanning her posture for any hint of defiance or manipulation. Nothing remained except sorrow and regret. She slid the final page across the table, pen rolling away. Her eyes lifted, shining with anguish. What will you do now? She whispered. I retrieved the paperwork, stowing it in my folio. Rebuild. My throat constricted for an instant, but I held firm. Don't contact me. Our lawyer will handle the rest. She nodded mutely. I turned toward the door, pausing only to glance at the wedding photo perched on a nearby shelf. Our laughing faces, once full of promise. An echo of heartbreak seized me, but I willed myself onward. The next few weeks blurred as I wrapped up personal affairs. I stayed at a small rental house on the outskirts of Crescent Springs, finishing security consulting projects in remote form. Freed from the weight of Ramona's lies, I felt strangely calm. I arranged meetings with a real estate agent to sell the house, ignoring pangs of nostalgia for the home we once shared. My nights stayed quiet, though I sometimes dreamed of the parking garage scene, replaying the bitter moment I caught them entwined. Eventually, the legal process moved forward, making the divorce official. Ramona texted once, a single line. "I'm sorry." I deleted it without replying. Some wounds fester too deeply for quick remedies. My heart still ached, but an odd sense of triumph buoyed me. I had defended my dignity, punished the man who invaded my marriage, and refused to degrade myself by clinging to a shattered relationship. Boris called again to update me on Roland's case. "He faces fraud charges," Boris said over the phone. "He might serve time. You did a number on him, Gregor." My lips twisted in a sardonic grin. "He earned his fate." Boris let a pause stretch out. "I understand your anger, but be cautious. Vengeance can corrode a man." I exhaled, glancing around my modest rental living room. "I did what needed doing. I'll move on." Boris offered a quiet grunt of acceptance, then ended the call. By late autumn, I finalized the sale of our old property. Ramona apparently moved to a smaller condo across town. Word filtered through acquaintances. She kept a low profile, seldom attending social gatherings. Her disgrace lingered like a storm cloud. Part of me, the part once devoted to her, felt a tug of regret. Another part accepted she orchestrated her own downfall. I contemplated a fresh start. Perhaps a different city, fresh clients. I tossed extra clothes into a suitcase, perched it by the door. A sense of release settled over my shoulders. My bank account remained healthy, courtesy of my steady consulting contracts. I answered a few calls from prospective clients, men and women who requested guidance in digital security. I said yes to a new gig in North Ridge, a few hours south. A change might help me bury the ghosts of the past. On my final evening in Crescent Springs, I stepped onto the porch of my rental place. Sunset flared across the horizon, bathing rooftops in amber light. The warmth across my face stirred a quiet gratitude. Despite the heartbreak, I still stood, unbroken, forging a path ahead. Ramona's memory would remain a scar, a cautionary tale about trust and vulnerability. Roland's ruin would echo in local gossip, a reminder no betrayal goes unanswered. I watched a hawk glide overhead, hunting in the twilight. My chest rose and fell in measured rhythm. Tomorrow I would load my sedan, drive south, and begin anew. This saga, for its pain and chaos, sharpened my resolve. I learned to sense deception beneath a polished exterior, to remain vigilant. My sense of justice, although harsh, guided me through darkness. I might carry regrets, but I would never cower. The next morning, I locked the door of my rental house, a single suitcase in hand. The engine of my sedan purred to life. A final glance at the quiet street. I drove off, ready to carve out a new chapter. Nightmares of betrayal might haunt me, but I would greet the future with open eyes and an armored heart. My vow: never permit such treachery again.